When I first started in selling, or let's say when I first got out of college, I didn't have a lot to offer because I had a bachelor's degree in psychology, which was worth virtually nothing in the marketplace. And the only people that really paid me any attention whatsoever were people looking for salespeople. And my image of a salesperson was a car salesman, or it was someone you'd see at a comic strip, a door-to-door kind of salesperson. Yeah. Back in those days, women were opening the doors and slamming the door in the salesperson's face. And it just didn't look very romantic to me to be a salesperson. So I decided that I would stick with psychology, and I went to work in a psychiatric ward, and the pay was so little, I mean, I couldn't do anything. I mean, I barely could pay for an apartment. So I moved up one level into sales with Atlanta newspapers. I was still not making a lot of money, and my father had a lumber yard outside of Atlanta. He had a salesperson that took an interest in me. He drove a Mercedes, so I knew he made some money. At the time I knew him, he was a referee in the Southeast football conference. He was a football player growing up. And he said, Bill, you know, we've got a job opening right here in Atlanta. I'm sure if you interviewed for the job, you could get it. It paid double what I was making. I've often said there's as much to learn about sales as there is about fine wine or medicine or anything. There's so much to learn. It's a great industry and a great profession.
All right, John Sterling here. Listen, I help salespeople get started fast. I've got a podcast for you here today called Noob School, where we interview crazy good salespeople, outstanding VPs of sales, and business owners who are all successful and started in sales. We're going to drill back to when they were just getting going. We're going to learn about some of the smart things that they've done to help them crush it, and also some of the things that slowed them down. We're going to publish this podcast every Friday morning so you can get some juicy weekly tidbits. It's going to help make you better and better every week. So we'll help your sales career get launched like a rocket ship. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and believe it or not, TikTok. No dancing, I promise. Maybe some dancing. SalesTrainingForNoobs.com is the website. Enjoy the Noob School. Back at Noob School, I've got, I'll say he's a good friend, has been for a long time, but Bill actually saved my bacon back in the day. I think it was about 1990 or so, and I was a young sales manager in over my, let's say beyond my pay grade. I don't know what I was, but I didn't know what I was doing basically. But I was trying, and I had 5 or 6 salespeople, and we were hustling, trying to make sales. And somehow, I don't know how, Bill, you might remember, but we got hooked up, and we hired you for a couple of days of sales consulting, I guess, for lack of a better word. And it wasn't exactly what you did because you were more focused on the lumber yards, you know, than what we were doing. But I think maybe a friend of a friend or something got us hooked up. And I'll never forget. I was so proud of what I had done. I had a little sales room, and I had salespeople, and I had a board, and, you know, I was really kind of excited. And Bill looked at my sales board and said, it looks like it's interesting. This guy here, Frank, he's doing like 3,000 this month, and this guy's doing 30,000, and this person's doing 55,000. They're kind of all over the place. So is that consistent with your hiring profile? And I'm like, my what? He said, the ideal profile you're looking for, the perfect person that you're going to recruit to come sell for you, to give you consistent results over a long period of time. And I think I just, I was like, oh my gosh. I don't know whether I was embarrassed or excited, but
never thought about that.
I never thought about it before. I was just kind of hiring people like most people still do today, most smaller businesses, where they just like, well, Frances is she's the cousin of my friend Julie, and she seems like a nice girl. She went to Auburn. Let's give her a try. Do you still see that happening a lot?
Absolutely. People hire friends and they hire neighbors, and what I usually say is that you hire people who'll come to work for what you're willing to pay.
Yeah.
and let's get started.
Yeah, I agree. I see it all the time, and that's exactly what I was doing. And no kidding, Bill, I don't know if you remember this, but I was so frustrated that I could not get them to get to work on time. I couldn't get them to make the number of calls I wanted a day. It was just so, I literally had a heart monitor on for afibrillation. I was just so crazy. And you were like, well, John, that's going to change when you get the right people. This is your fault. And you didn't quite come out and say it, but that's what I heard. Like, it's my responsibility.
Yeah. A lot of times I use the analogy of sports is say, well, I'm going to hire a baseball player.
Right.
Well, there are a lot of baseball players out there that can't play very good baseball.
Right.
But they know the rules and they try.
Right.
But they don't have the right stuff.
Right.
And we're looking for people with the right stuff.
Right. And it also, I've learned from you that, it is quite the disservice to those people who aren't a good fit to come into my organization and have me try to beat them, to do what I want. Because it's not in their nature. Yep. They should be doing something that's more in their nature.
Exactly.
So thank you for that. I've thanked you before, but I'll thank you again.
I remember learning that very same lesson.
You learned it too?
Yeah. The first time we learned about testing was our CEO, Clarence Balknight, who you know quite well, is we were doing business with, I believe it was CNS Bank back in those days.
Yeah.
And they gave him a test. And they scored the test. And they said, if you're not CEO of your company, you should be. Mm-hmm. Well, he was sold immediately.
He loves testing, yeah.
He was sold immediately because he was our CEO.
Yeah.
And we started that test.
Yeah.
And it was the first time we really learned how to categorize people's behavior and get a good shot at how they're going to perform.
Right. Well, the one you turned me on to, the main one was the Kolbe test. And I know that we
and that came a little bit later. They didn't start until 89.
Right. But Bill, and I've done this for other companies since, so I'm passing it forward. But Bill came in and I said, well, how are we going to do this, Bill? Like incredulously, how can you possibly do this? And he's like, well, we're going to test all your salespeople and just see if there's any pattern of the high performers and the low performers in terms of what the scores are. And then if there is, then we're going to take those scores of the top people and start trying to hire people more like them. And there's other traits that go with it, like where they went to school, what they majored in, did they play sports, were they leaders, these different little pieces that we could add to it. But in essence, the Kolbe was kind of our, one of the main things that we used. And, we went from, when I met you, five salespeople, to when we sold the business, we had 100. And the next 95 all were in that range.
Well, if you think about it, the Kolbe and all the testing that we used and that you used is a scientific instrument.
Right.
I mean, it's nothing guesswork about it.
Right.
It's been proven to be accurate.
Right. Yeah. And people one of the arguments I still hear, and I heard it then, was, well, there are people who don't fit in your perfect little profile who could sell your stuff. And I'm like, that's true. But I don't want to be the guy sifting through all of that, right? I don't want to take the chance that I'll hire 8 people where it's not a good fit for them.
Exactly.
And I did. I'm sure everyone does it too. I did every now and then, go out and take a chance.
Yeah.
I like the person so much, and normally it was a mistake. Not always.
Yeah, we hit it off.
Yeah.
We hit it off. We just instantly hit it off.
I can change him. That's the good one. I'll change him. But yeah. But anyway, that was really cool. That was really cool. Now, you came here. I know was it Chattanooga or
from Atlanta?
Yeah, from Atlanta.
Yeah.
From Atlanta. Okay. And you went to Emory.
Went to Emory.
And you got 2 degrees from there?
No, just one. Just psychology.
Psychology.
Minor in business.
Okay. And the psychology, did what they teach you help you in sales?
A little bit. Actually, I learned a lot about testing.
Okay.
in psychology. It was clinical testing for mental health, but it was still an instrument. And it was, I learned that you could gain a lot of insight into people by giving them a test.
Right. Interesting. That's 4 years seems like a long time to learn that.
And another thing I'll mention about psychology is in interviewing people and talking to people, you learn not to do all the talking. You learn they call it the Rogerian theory, but you say and after that you just let them go.
Yeah.
And my theory is you want to listen to what people talk about, because they talk about what's interesting to them. Not what's interesting to me, but what's interesting to them.
Yeah.
And when you ask them questions, you try to do it about the things they're interested in as opposed to the things I'm interested in.
Right.
And I learned that in psychology.
That's cool. That's cool. I've got a cousin like that who every time we're around her, she just keeps asking these questions and we just keep talking. Sometimes I know what she's doing and I'm going along with it.
You can't stop.
No, I like talking. So yeah, it's Rogerian theory. That's interesting. So you came here, you got recruited to come work for Builder Mart.
Yes.
Okay. And you were already in the trade.
Yeah, I was a salesperson for an asphalt roofing company.
Okay.
I was sales manager, in fact, and in Savannah.
Okay.
And I knew Builder Marts through being a customer. They were our biggest customer.
Right. Okay. So Builder Marts, just for the audience, I'll give my version of it. I mean, it's one of the biggest success stories in Greenville ever. It's now sold, but at the time, it was almost $500 million. And our claim to fame, we took that company from scratch, zero, to $648 million in 19 years. Wow, that's strong. That's strong. And then for the people that sold the company, and then how many executives like yourself do you think stayed in Greenville and started businesses? And
a couple of dozen, probably. Yeah.
That's strong. That's strong. That's the thing that people, I think, sometimes overlook about a business is, they bring these great people here from Atlanta and other places. And during that rise, that 19 years or however long the part you were there, what was kind of your main sales methodology that helped you grow that fast?
The number one thing we had a unique approach to the business. We gave an exclusive to what we tried to find to be the biggest, most powerful business in town, and we were focusing on the building supply industry.
Okay.
And we would go to those people and give them an opportunity to buy through us, and if our price was equal or better.
Right.
That was our kind of a gentleman's agreement.
Yeah.
That if our price was equal or better, you'd do business with us.
Right.
And we had all the top manufacturers anyway.
Yeah.
And they jumped all over that.
Yeah.
They liked that idea. And probably the biggest obstacle we faced is the same thing salespeople face today, is relationships, personal relationships that these people had with other vendors.
Sure.
And they weren't willing to sacrifice those relationships.
Right.
And our job was to break it.
Right. Interesting. So just so I understand it, if you were a lumber yard back then, you had lots of relationships with different suppliers.
That's true.
And what you offered at Builder Mart was just one relationship with Builder Mart, and you'd be kind of the distributor for all those different suppliers.
Well, we gave them the buying power.
Okay.
And they still had salespeople calling on them from the vendors that we represented.
Okay.
So they had the benefit of the sales force from the individual companies, but the billing came through us, and that gave us that millions of dollars worth of volume that gave us the buying power to do what we did.
That's so cool. That's so cool. It was a great run, absolute great run. What did the very best salespeople do that differentiate the top 10%, the President's Club people at Builder Mart? What do they do different than the rest of the people?
Well, that's a great question because I remember I had the tremendous respect for Clarence Bachknight, and he was a very intelligent man, not just with the numbers, but he was a great salesman too. And he did it by the book. I mean, he had a method to his madness, and his philosophy was to do something for your customer, do something for your prospect, do something to help them solve their most pressing business problems, do something to help them make more money. And try to find out what those things are by asking questions, by getting to know their people, by touring their facility. And once we did that, once we did something tangible that they couldn't do for themselves, it opened the doors beautifully. I remember one time we had a customer that just would not do a sufficient amount of business with us.
Right.
And Clarence says, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go up there and ask him permission to do a takeoff of his showroom. Now, back in those days, there were no Home Depots or Lowe's. Lowe's was around, but they didn't have the big box stores like they do today. And he said, I want you to take off their showroom, place the posts where they are, the doors and the windows, and just do a layout for it, and then bring it back here, and we'll lay it out professionally, placing our products on the gondolas.
Okay.
And we'll do the signage. We'll make it really look sharp. And I did that. You know, I mean, that was easy to do.
Yeah.
And I brought it back, and we had another fellow in our company named Tom Mills who was extremely good at doing store layouts, and he did that. He did the work on that. And I took it back to this guy, and his jaw just dropped. Wow, I can't believe that you did this for us.
No.
This is beautiful. And it automatically it changed our image. In other words, we were doing consultative selling.
Right.
We were doing something for him that he couldn't do for himself.
Right.
He had a showroom, but it was dusty and dirty, and it wasn't very appealing, especially to women.
Yeah.
And women make most of the decisions on showroom material.
Yeah.
And that was an example.
Yeah.
One thing I brought with me is one of our former Builder Mart people, Jim Sobeck, who is still in town and is CEO of a really large company here. But Jim wrote a book called The Real Business 101.
Yep.
Lessons from the Trenches. And he's got, this is the most interesting book I've ever read. I use it today all the time, but it has 123 chapters, and each chapter is 3 or 4 pages long, and it's the solution to a problem in a business.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is what I show salespeople when I do sales training. Carry this book with you, and when you see a problem in a business, odds are the solution's in this book.
Right, right.
And I've never seen a book written like this before.
Yeah. It's a great book. I've read the book. It goes down like if you're worried about collections and credit reports and just every little thing you can think of.
It's just telephone tips, selling tips, disaster planning, developing talent.
Yeah.
And this is a way a salesperson who doesn't know a lot about business,
right,
if they can just identify the issues that a business is facing,
right,
odds are the solutions are in this book.
Right. I agree. And I mean, I'll just add on to that. First of all, I love the book and Jim Sobek, and he's going to be on the podcast, I think, in about a month. So he's agreed to be on. But I hear salespeople all the time, young and old, meet a new prospect and say, well, Bill, the thing is, I want to be your trusted advisor. And then the big smile, I want to be your trusted advisor. And the buyer's going, ugh, I've heard it all before. But when you do something, like Clarence says, when you actually do something, then you're showing him. All of a sudden, you're on the same side of the table working on this problem out here together. And then the next thing that comes along, it's going to count on it. You are going to be his trusted advisor.
Let me tell you another idea.
Yeah.
Depending on the salesperson. But if the salesperson's had any training and knows something that he can teach, my experience has been that salespeople in a typical business have never had any training other than product knowledge.
Right. Right.
That's all they know.
Well, that's what the owner typically thinks training is.
Yeah.
They know the product.
They, ride with our drivers and see what we deliver.
Yeah.
But they don't know any of the techniques to selling. How do you open conversation and the things we're talking about today. And I encourage the salespeople to say, listen, one thing that I enjoy doing, if you'll give me permission to, is maybe conduct a lunch and learn program for your sales force. Give them, we'll bring in a box lunch and I'll do 45 minutes of sales training.
Yeah.
And I've got maybe 10 programs I can do like that.
Yeah.
And give them something tangible that they can go out and do to improve their odds of getting the business.
So do you do that as part of you're trying to get business for Lee Resources? Would you go in and say, let me do a lunch and learn for your group and maybe get some?
Well, I would if I were, but I work nationwide. I work throughout North America.
Okay.
And it's hard for me to do it in Vancouver.
Okay.
To run out and do a lunch and learn.
Sure.
But this is more for local salespeople.
Yeah. So you would do that as part of the sales process.
Right.
So, the next thing we do before you get a big commitment, let me just come out and talk to your salespeople. I'll teach them something about negotiation training.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Now, you bring up another good point about when I first started selling, I had excellent product knowledge training. Fortunately, it was a product that didn't have a great deal of mystery to it.
Yeah.
Well, asphalt roofing. But I knew how the products were made and I knew how to deal with a complaint and that sort of thing. But as far as sales techniques or sales tools, I had no clue.
Yeah.
And I would go out. I remember when I went out by myself the first time, I had no idea what to say. And the first thing that I did, I said, well, how's our price? Are we competitive? Or anybody been cutting the price?
Should we lower it?
And I mean, that's about what I would have said next. But salespeople today will frequently say, let me quote you a few prices. Let me just quote you a few prices to give you an idea of where we stand. Just so you'll know whether we're competitive or not.
Yeah.
And when they offer to quote prices, what they're not saying is, we have the lowest price in the market. Do business with us.
Yeah.
And the truth is, nobody really has the lowest price in the market because the market sets its own, it's like water, it seeks its own level. And if you lower the price, I'll meet your price.
Yeah.
If I lower the price, you meet my price. And we eventually learn that that's not the way to do business.
Yeah. I was the same way, Bill. I remember, I had no formal tactical training and, particularly going out and seeing people in person. The phone's a little bit easier, I think, because you kind of have a script usually. But it's just showing up and just completely letting them take over. Like, where are we going? What are we going to talk? What do you want to talk about? It was pitiful. And so it kind of makes me more interested in helping people because the stuff we're talking about is not that difficult. Having an agenda ahead of time and
Well, what you want to avoid doing is being a waste of the man's time.
Yeah.
The person's time.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have something to bring to the party,
Right.
you're basically wasting the person's time.
Right. Right.
And they want to get you out of there and get to the next salesperson.
Yeah. Yeah. I had some of those. I think I now know what some of those stares meant early on. They were like, wasting my time, kid.
Did I ever tell you about the salesperson that, the buyer that wrote a book? He was in purchasing for 20 years, and
Tell me.
he wrote a book. The title was "What Buyers Say Behind Your Back After You Leave," and he and his fellow buyers kept meticulous notes about what the salespeople said and did on sales calls.
Yeah.
And they'd talk about them after they left and compare notes. And he says it's amazing when you if you could hear what's being said about you after you walk out the door. You know, that guy was the biggest waste of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
They walked in this, and yet we need more like him.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And which one are you?
Right. Yeah. And so he wrote a book on it. What's his name? Do you remember?
Yes, his name is Bradley Hartman.
Bradley. Okay. He's got a podcast.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I've looked at some of that. That's interesting. Okay. Well, let's switch gears a little bit. Now, of the Builder Mart run, which was 19 years, you were there for most of that.
Yeah.
And then you left and you started Lee Resources.
That's correct.
So why would you do that?
Well, it was the peak. I felt like it was the peak.
Okay.
One thing is about getting old is that you've been through a lot of corrections and recessions, and it's like what we're in right now. I mean, we're just blowing it out economy-wise, and there's got to be a correction coming soon.
Yeah, right.
And that always happens.
Yeah.
And I felt like we were at the absolute peak. I felt like I was at the peak of my career age-wise.
Yeah.
And I had something I wanted to do full-time.
Yeah.
And that was be a consultant and a trainer in this industry, in my industry.
Right, in your industry.
And so I put together a business plan and rented me an office.
Yeah.
A one-room office.
Yeah.
And went to work.
And again, I mean, just for the sake of the noobs, I'll always point out when somebody gets into a career, in this case, the building supply career, early, and you continue to stick with it your whole career. So from salesperson in roofing to executive with Builder Marts to sales trainer for lumber yards,
right,
and writing a book about it and all that stuff. I mean, it's just Bill has contacts that are CEOs and people who write the magazines and run the websites in this industry that he's known for 30 years, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if he sold out to me tomorrow and he said, I'm going to go get my CPA and be an accountant, he wouldn't know anybody.
That's right.
That's
exactly
if
right.
you had another 50 years to work on it, you could figure it all out. But,
yeah.
Why keep starting and, starting over? So I think it's a good idea. Did you recommend the same thing to people?
Absolutely. I see in my old industry, virtually everyone stayed in the industry.
Yeah.
And the reason is if there's one key to sales that doesn't have anything to do with training necessarily, but it's relationships.
Right.
Who trusts you? Who knows you? Who believes in you?
Right.
Who knows you that you have great integrity?
Right.
That's the kind of person you want to do business with. And no matter which company they work for, you tend to do business with them.
Right, right. So that's why I think it's such an important, and one of the reasons I wrote this book, it's so important early on to figure out, first of all, what do you want to be? Do you want to be a salesperson? Do you want to be a manager? And kind of get that situated and then figure out what area are you comfortable hanging out in? Because you've been hanging out in the building industry for your whole career. And you obviously like it. But if it was me, could say, well, I'm about to start my career. I love fishing. all I like to do is fish, and so I'm going to go to work for Bassmaster, or I'm going to get in that industry and be selling, kind of.
Well, every industry has its own lingo.
Yeah.
Its own slang and code words.
Right.
And once you learn those words, you're in. You're one of them.
Right. It's a different language.
Yeah.
I found that when I switched over and bought the warehousing software company, Foxfire, as I got over there. These guys that worked for me, they were talking in this language. I didn't know what they were talking about. So anyway, stick to what you're doing. So at Lee Resources, give us some more examples of the kind of thing you did and that you saw with the Kolbe that helped, like the building supply companies you dealt with.
Well, you hit the nail on the head when we first started about people hire people they know, and they hire people that they hit it off with during the interview. But we had used testing at BMA for years and years and years, and I believed in it with all my heart. I was kind of the resident expert on one of the tests that we used. The Kolbe didn't exist at that time, and I started immediately offering that as a product, you might say.
Right.
And I used the DISC, D-I-S-C, that measured a person's personality, and then I heard about the Kolbe from a psychologist who was using Kolbe terminology, and I thought, I majored in psychology. I try to keep up with it. I don't know what this guy's talking about. And I said, what is conation?
Yeah.
I've never heard that word. And he starts explaining it to me, and I said, where did you learn all that? He said, well, there's this woman out in Phoenix.
Yeah.
And I mean, the next day I called and made an appointment to go out and be in one of her programs.
Yeah.
And I was on the ground floor of the Kolbe, and that helped me enormously. It gave me a double the ammunition that I had in the past.
Right.
And so we tested about 30,000 people.
Wow, man!
With the Kolbe and the DISC.
Wow.
And we had 3 people committed to that business by itself.
I remember because we did quite a few with you, and we would get the people to take the Kolbe, and then Bill and his team would spend days writing up like pages of analysis on the people. I always kind of felt a little bad because I was like, just tell me what the numbers were. I just want to know the numbers, because it's my little splashback.
Once you learn the numbers.
Yeah. Well, that's so cool. The Kolbe, I would say if I was hired to be a picker of salespeople, and I have the Kolbe and the other person doesn't, it's like cheating. It's like a cheat code, I think. That's the way I always thought of it.
Well, it's like going to a doctor and he talks to you and tries to diagnose you.
Right.
But, he gives you blood tests.
Right.
Various and sundry, listens to your heart, and he measures all these things and makes a diagnosis. And that's what you're basically doing when you interview.
Right. You're right. You're right. And it really, if I found 2 people and I liked them, thought they were both squared away and both could be good, test them both. And if one had the numbers and one didn't, it was easy pickings. And it was good. It was a good call for the person who didn't get the job.
So many times we look at a person's image.
Yeah.
They just knock you dead with their image and their personality, and that doesn't last very long.
Right.
Once you get past that, you got to get to substance.
Right. Well, I know you wrote a book called Gross Margin, which I read and loved, and basically that's about ways to have salespeople think more about how much money you're actually making per sale versus just the total price, obviously. And oddly enough, in our data stream rise, we never got to 600 million, but we got to about 100. Our jumps in revenue
considerably higher margin, though.
There's a good margin. Software's a good margin. But our jumps came when we raised the price. And we kind of did it accidentally. And what I mean is, like when Windows came out, we said, well, this is a good time to raise the price. We should make it more expensive than the old one. Right. And so we almost doubled it. And the unit sales stayed the same. The salespeople were clicking out the same number of units, so sales almost doubled. And then somebody had the idea to bundle in some other stuff with it, some services and stuff, and that almost doubled it again. And then when the internet came out and client server, and it was almost like technology. We didn't understand the gross margin at that time, but technology gave us the idea that we should raise our price, and unit sales kind of stayed the same every time.
Well, one of the statements I make about pricing is that salespeople are usually far more price sensitive than the customer is.
Right.
I mean, we're scared to death our price is going to be too high.
Right.
Because customers, they never say, you guys need to lower your price a little bit. Yeah. I mean, you need to jack up your prices a little bit. Yeah. They're always saying you need to lower it.
Right.
And we as salespeople are gun shy. Mm-hmm. We don't want to quote a price that comes across as high.
Yeah.
But you get what you pay for. Yeah. And with technology, you're going to get a return on that investment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the way I look at it now. I didn't look at it that way when I was a junior sales guy because I was all scared about price and, $100,000 seems like a lot. And it does seem like a lot unless you honestly understand how much money you're going to save that company. And if it's $1 million or more and you're saying it's $100,000, it's like they should say, well, gosh, that's a real deal.
Well, especially when you consider before you came along, they were getting the job done anyway.
Right. Right.
Without your product.
Right.
Now you're trying to give them, and that was what it was. I was with a computer company for 5 years, and they were using a bookkeeping machine.
Yeah.
And it didn't give them much information, but it was dirt cheap.
Yeah.
And here we're coming along. Our average price was $120,000.
Yeah.
And they were thinking, now, what am I going to get for $120,000?
Yeah.
And you had to be prepared to give them a return on that.
Show them that. A few more questions, Bill. So what's something that you thought about sales when you were just getting started that turned out to be completely different than what you thought?
Well, when I first started in selling, or let's say when I first got out of college, I didn't have a lot to offer because I had a bachelor's degree in psychology, which was worth virtually nothing in the marketplace. And the only people that really paid me any attention whatsoever were people looking for salespeople. And my image of a salesperson was a car salesman, or it was someone you see at a comic strip, a door-to-door kind of salesperson. Yeah. And back in those days, before woman's lib, women were opening the doors and slamming the door in the salesperson's face, and it just didn't look very romantic to me to be a salesperson. So I decided that I would stick with psychology, and I went to work in a psychiatric ward, and the pay was so little. I mean, I couldn't do anything. I mean, I barely could pay for an apartment, and so I moved up one level into sales with Atlanta newspapers, and then I was still not making a lot of money, and my father had a lumber yard in outside of Atlanta, and he had a salesperson that took an interest in me. And he drove a Mercedes, so I knew he made some money. And he was, at the time I knew him, he was a referee in the Southeast Football Conference. He was a football player growing up. Yeah. And so I just had a lot of respect for this fellow. And he said, Bill, we've got a job opening right here in Atlanta. I'm sure if you interviewed for the job, you could get it. And it pays double. It paid double what I was making. Double. And I interviewed with his sales manager, and I turned the job down. because I didn't want to be a salesperson.
Oh, wow.
And I wasn't very impressed with the sales manager anyway.
Yeah.
And this guy would not give up on me. He telephoned a friend of his in Mobile, Alabama, where they had another plant, manufacturing plant. And he said, I've got this young man up here in Atlanta. I believe he'd be an asset to our company, but he's got some strange ideas about sales. And my boss couldn't hire him, and I wonder if you would talk to him. He said, oh, I'll be glad to. And he calls me at home one night and offered to fly me to Mobile, Alabama. Well, I'd never been on a jet airplane. And that appealed to me.
Yeah.
To fly down there. So I said, yes, sir, I'd love to come interview with you. So I get off the plane, he picks me up, takes me to dinner, and all he did was ask me questions all night. He didn't tell me anything.
Yeah.
He didn't try to sell me anything. He just tried to learn what I was all about. And the next day, he starts selling. And he was night and day different than the sales manager I spoke to in Atlanta. And I said, well, I'll take the job. He says, no, you won't. He said, you'll go home and talk to your wife about it first. Then you may take it if she agrees.
That's pretty smart.
And so I went to work with him. And he was my first mentor. And he taught me so much about selling. And I found out it was a respectable job, first of all. That it was a profession. It wasn't just something that you did if you couldn't get a job doing something else.
Yeah.
And it's something that I could learn a lot about. I mean, there was a lot to know. And I've often said there's as much to learn about sales as there is about fine wine or medicine or anything. There's so much to learn. Yeah. And it's a great industry and a great profession.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. I got just two more questions. I need to know the favorite word, Bill. What's your favorite word?
Well, I used it a few minutes ago. Integrity.
Integrity. Okay.
The integrity is something that I think everyone respects, and everybody wants more of it. And it's the watchword for me. I do my best to have integrity and for people to never be able to talk about me behind my back and say that you can't believe a word he says, but tell the truth whether it sounds good or not.
Yeah, that's a great word. I think you're safe. And let's close up. Tell us about the latest book, 30 Ways Managers Shoot Themselves in the Foot.
Well, gross margin I wrote that book because I had a real passion for gross margin. And most people think about gross margin as being buying better. And I identified 26 factors that affect gross margin. And that's what that book was about. But on the consulting side of my business, I was dealing with owners and managers and CEOs. And I identified 30 ways that I thought were the most common ways that managers shoot themselves in the foot. Where and hiring is one of them. You know, hiring people that are willing to come to work for what you're willing to pay. And lack of training, not investing in your people, those kinds of areas. And so I have 30 chapters, and one chapter is every chapter is about a way that managers typically shoot themselves in the foot.
Is there anything in there about like getting too juiced up at like a Christmas party?
Well, I didn't include that one.
Okay. Everyone should know that one. Well, Bill, I started by saying thank you. I'll say thank you again. I appreciate you saving my bacon way back in the day, and then our friendship ever since.
Well, it's been a pleasure working with you all these years.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, my friend.
Appreciate it. Okay.